Kuram gajong Romo malo krok chal kor lwasi dhi nyime kar bago rombe ma KICC kama jotenda pinje par kod auchiel ochopo nyasi makamano. Jotelo mag pinje mopogore opogore kawuono twak ewi moko kuom chenro mago manyalo konyo pinje mantiere Afrika e rakruok kod lokruok chal kor lwasi. Kuram gajwang wadhi wawinji anena atera achiel kachiel iwinje gino madhi mbele e kar bago romo ma KICC ka bende romono dhi mbele sechegi.
Supported by at least by concessional credits in conformity with the what was agreed in Paris. In the perspective of COP28, we should pursue our advocacy for the mobilization of resources dedicated to green financing. That is the key to resolve the problem of climate change and global warming through responsible and interdependent efforts of countries from developing countries. To conclude, I want to express my support to the Alliance for Green Infrastructure initiated by the African Development Bank, the African Union and Africa 50 in order to support the execution of the projects that are carbon sober and that are resilient, and I want to invite all the partners to contribute to this initiative. And finally, I thank the Central Adaptation Center in its work of promotion of the program to accelerate adaptation in Africa. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. A round of applause for President Macky Sall, please. Now it's the opportunity for President Jacinto Felipe Nyusi, the President of Mozambique, to make his statement. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Ruto, for this opportunity. Your Excellency William Ruto, President of Kenya, Your Excellency Azar Usman, President of Comoros and the Chair at the AU, distinguished heads of state and government, Your Excellency Moussa Faki from the AU Commission, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to commend the invitation of Your Excellency President Ruto and the warm welcome and the invitation to participate in the Africa Climate Summit hosted by the Kenyan government together with the AU Commission. Your Excellencies, the decision by the African Union General Assembly to host this event is in order to have a shared African vision regarding the climate crisis that is affecting the world and mostly Mozambique, Africa. And looking specifically at Mozambique, the country is cyclically ravaged by the impacts of climate change. It's not what I've heard about. This is what we live. And as of February every year, and even until May, we suffer from the adverse effects of climate change. Since 2019, we have suffered from the cyclones Idai, Dineo, Freddy, amongst others. We had many natural storms and drought. Cyclone Freddy was extraordinary because it took longer time, more than 14 days, and we were affected twice by Cyclone Freddy, because first affected us on the coast and then went back, and then it affected again Mozambique on its pathway to Malawi. We know that such disasters affect negatively populations in Mozambique, not only, but in other countries. Your Excellency, your President, the interventions that we've heard were exhaustive. Such statements try to explain what is climate change and what are the impacts of climate change. So I'll not be repetitive, and I would like to be more objective and straightforward by sharing the experience of Mozambique with regard to climate change, prevention, mitigation, and adaptation, and to emphasize the following. First, the conservation areas. 25% of the Mozambican territory is covered by parks, reserves, game parks, including marine protection areas. In this perspective, different actions were endeavored by the Mozambican government, together with private partners and local communities, in protecting these areas that have led to the reduction of poaching of rhinos, lions, as well as illegal logging. So why am I referring to the cooperation of communities? Because very often we just talk at a high level, but those that are living those realities with the nature is communities. So they have to be collaborating with us in order to protect what are their livelihoods. I've also spoken about elephants. You know that the best gardener in the forest is the animal, specifically elephant, meaning that if we do not protect, for example, our animals, our gardens and our forests can be threatened seriously. Secondly, Mozambique hosts the most extensive Miombo forest, which is the largest ecosystemic system in the world, and it extends for more than 2,564 kilometers throughout the Zambezi Basin. As a way of protecting the Zambezi Basin that covers 8 countries from Southern Africa, last year we have held the regional conference under the leitmotif towards an integrated and sustainable management of Miombo, towards resilience to climate change and protection of the Great Zambezi. Thirdly, in Mozambique, the disaster risk management is governed by law, whereby it sets forth an integrated disaster risk management reduction, sustainable recovery of human resiliency, as well as infrastructural resiliency, ecosystemic resiliency, and climate change adaptation. I would like to emphasize that, for example, for each construction work that occurs in Mozambique, they have to comply with the law in order to be considered as resilient construction works. Fourth, we have created disaster risk insurance in order to cater for situations of natural disasters and support of vulnerable groups. One of the efforts towards disaster risk management and reduction is by engaging local communities, as also referred, but we are also prioritizing conservation agriculture. This is relevant in our strategy towards food security, and we promote the preservation of soil quality, the preservation of water resources, the prevention of wildfires that led to deforestation and adverse effects from climate change. Moreover, the management of biomass energy, considering that our rural communities greatly rely on firewood. So we have been expanding rural electrification based on our national grid from the Cabora Bassa Dam and solar grids within the initiative Energy for All. Besides expanding the Cabora Bassa Dam that serves up some of the countries in Southern Africa, we are also prioritizing some hydroelectric projects such as Pandakua as well as the Ntemani gas plant. And Ntemani will have around 400 megawatts, will be the major one. 8, we have the territorial planning project. Through the territorial development and spatial planning. And this occurs because very often we see that people just build irregularly. And if we do not plan how we are going to build our urban spaces, we can lead or contribute towards erosion. Another aspect has to do with institutional and legal reforms based on the protection of biodiversity, including the reactivation of the main fines, and meaning that we have severed fines and penalties against poaching, related to poaching, as well as illegal logging. As a result of these institutional and legal reforms, Mozambique has been considered in carbon credits, and Mozambique is the first African country to receive payments from the World Bank related to carbon trade. By strengthening the early warning system, we have implemented the program One District, One Weather Center. I'm just emphasizing what we're doing as a country because we cyclically suffer from adverse weather effects. So we have decided to strengthen our early warning systems so that communities are ready when those disasters strike us. This year we have also inaugurated the Beira meteorology radar in the central part of our country in order to detect cyclones in a radius of 400 kilometers, and we are planning on setting up 2 additional radars in the northern and southern part of the country. Hence, we will be covering the whole country. We also adopted the Maputo Declaration regarding the integrated early warning system that fits into the national operational and strategic goals. We would also like to share that Mozambique also hosts the the SADC Humanitarian Operation Center, which is a center aiming at protection and prevention. Mozambique has an extensive coastline of around 2,700 kilometers, meaning that we should give special attention to the ocean as the regulator of temperature and climate in the planet. We have ratified the Marpol Convention of 1978 regarding sea pollution that also complements the national legislation regarding illegal fishing and the protection of marine diversity. Meaning that if we do not protect our biodiversity, we are going to contribute towards negative impact of the environment, especially the oceans. Your Excellency, before I conclude, Your Excellency Ruto, I would like to show my appreciation for this initiative, and we also would like to exhort all the leaders here to subscribe as a single voice the Nairobi Declaration regarding climate change, and we have a collective action towards it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. A round of applause again for President Nyusi. Let me now take this opportunity to give the floor to President Nana Akufo-Addo, the President of Ghana. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
President Ruto, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I join other speakers in applauding the Kenyan President, our host, President William Ruto, for his initiative in convening this summit, and thank him for his hospitality. A summit to define a common African position towards the deliberations of COP28 in Dubai is a highly commendable one, especially if it can help us define how we can mobilize our own resources to address this critical issue of climate change. Ghana's nationally determined contributions towards combating climate change have been fully incorporated into government's coordinated program for economic and social development policies to facilitate their implementation. We have introduced major policy interventions that have development and climate projection imperatives. Our flagship programs, whether they are the programs for planting for food and jobs, or one village, one dam, or one district, one factory, are all geared towards boosting industrialization and rural development, as well as building our resilience to the impacts of climate change. The strategic focus of the One Village, One Dam initiative, for example, in the northern regions of our country, is to provide all year-round access to water to smallholder farmers who practically have no viable livelihood alternatives during the long dry seasons. We're also determined to make natural gas, which we have in abundance, available for the generation of electricity. We placed a ban on illegal mining, the phenomenon we call galamsey, which was destroying our water bodies, vegetation, and our forests. Some 20,000 young people have been engaged to plant more than 30 million trees in 2 years to create jobs and restore degraded land. These policy initiatives are already using positive results to the attainment of the SDG goals, particularly the goal of reducing our carbon emissions. Additionally, I have established an advisory group of prominent private sector chief executives who are setting up a $100 million SDGs delivery fund and a $200 million green fund to complement government's efforts at tackling climate change and funding the implementation of the SDGs. Whilst we strive to do our bit to halt climate change at the national level, we expect also a lot to be done at the international level. One major issue of concern to us is the need to streamline access to international climate finance to complement national funding. I believe this forum will throw more light on practical ways to mobilize financial resources to support the implementation of national climate actions, especially how we can guarantee a different future from the past and ensure that the commitments of the developed world towards climate finance, which have not been met in the past, will be met in the future. Excellencies, it is obvious that we have to act swiftly and decisively to mitigate these effects and ensure a sustainable future for generations to come. The impact of climate change, as we know, is not limited to the African continent alone. It is a global issue that affects all of us. Thus, addressing climate change in Africa, as President Ruto so forcefully articulated, is a moral and strategic necessity for global climate action. Hopefully, COP28 in Dubai will provide us a concrete roadmap towards that end and ensure a just energy transition for us in Africa. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. A round of applause again for President Nana. Let me now take this opportunity to ask my sister, the President of Tanzania, President Suluhu Hassan, to make her statement. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Your Excellency, President William Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya and Chair of the African Committee of Heads of State and Government on Climate Change, Excellencies, Heads of State and Governments, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. President, thank you very much for being a gracious host of this August Assembly that sets the tone of Africa's growth now and the future. I thank the government and the people of Kenya for the excellent preparation of the summit and the warm reception accorded to me and my delegation. The convening of this important summit is both timely and opportune, as the theme, driving green growth and climate finance solution for Africa and the world, is quite befitting, especially now ahead of COP28, where parties will take stock of our efforts to address the climate crisis and commitment to address both climate crisis in the context of the Paris Agreement and the Climate Convention itself. Excellencies, the stakes are high and actions have to take place not tomorrow, but today and literally now. As Africans, we have no choice but to seize the moment to capitalize on its potential to offer solutions to green growth and decarbonization, and while creating resilience to our communities and economies. We can no longer afford to address economic development, climate change, and African poverty burden in isolation. The interplay between development and climate change is undeniable, and this interlink demand integrated and coherent solution that would provide opportunity for socio-economic development of Africa. Excellencies, while the continent is highly impacted by the changing climate, it is nevertheless holding the key to solving the climate challenge. The just released Economic Development in Africa Report 2023 shows the potential of Africa to capture technology-intensive global supply chains, and it said it all about development of Africa with climate change. It provides a unique insight into Africa's centrality to the green transition that will clearly transform our continent economies. It is said that all metals and minerals that are important and strategic for the low carbon transition are abundantly found in Africa. And these are chromium, lithium, natural graphite, nickel, niobium, rare earth metals, silver, and many more. Given the abundance of these minerals, the continent needs to reposition itself not only as a supplier of raw materials globally, but strengthen the value chains by ensuring their conversion into intermediate and final products is done within the continent. As critical minerals, as they were called critical minerals, they have to make critical contributions to our internal revenue collection and employment creation. They also have to contribute critically in the environmental protection in our countries. So having all these, Africa has to stand firm to use the materials for our own development. Excellencies, human capital dividend in Africa is another force to reckon. To avoid the past mistakes in the history of our continent, we need to focus on human capital advancement by training our own people, especially youth, so as to be able to reap from these vast opportunities. We need to consider the climate crisis as an opportunity to address the youth unemployment challenges. Excellencies, beyond the African potentials, we have potentials in our individual countries. My country, Tanzania, is leading the way by demonstrating strong momentum in driving the green growth. Almost 95% of our energy is from hydro and natural gas. We are also leading in nature conservation with almost 38% of our landmass under conservation in various regimes. We are also committed in nurturing the ecosystems that hold the promise of creating thousands of new jobs and unlimited national economic and global benefits. Talking on the offering of critical mineral to the world, Tanzania has huge deposits of some of these critical minerals needed today. Helium is present around Lake Rukwa Basin, nickel deposits around Lake Victoria, graphite reserves at the southern eastern part of the country, and we also accommodate other deposits, critical minerals, including copper and lithium, as well as rare elements. Despite of the above scenario, we, however, need to face the fact that Tanzania, and indeed the whole of the African continent, still faces unprecedented impacts of climate change, with limited capacity to finance the mitigation and adaptation needs. And thus, as we head towards COP28, we have to raise an African voice on the establishment and capitalization of a special fund for Africa. The contribution and the pledges which are given by the advanced countries have to say what percentage of those pledges goes to Africa, and not just a blanket pledges. As I conclude, and as you are all aware, Tanzania is hosting the AGRIF Food and Agriculture Summit this same week. The presidential summit is on 7th of September, a day after tomorrow. I therefore wish to use this opportunity to once again invite you to Tanzania, and I'll personally be there to welcome you all. Once again, I congratulate you, Mr. President Ruto, for organizing such a successful event, and I look forward to seeing you all in Dar es Salaam. I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Another round of applause for President Samia Suluhu Hassan. Now it's my pleasure to request my brother, President Mohamed Yunus Memphi, the President of Libya, to make his remarks. Your Excellency, Mr. President.
Your Excellency, President of Kenya, President William Ruto, and head of the Committee of African Heads of States concerned with climate change. Heads of states, heads of government, members of the African Union, Mr. Fuka Musa Fiki, head of the African Commission. May I extend my wholeheartedly thanks to President Ruto and the Kenyan people for hosting this very important summit. It is important for Africa and it's important for the whole world. I'd like to congratulate President Ruto for his wise leadership for the African Committee on Climate Change. I value
Kuramuga jong mano kanyo en twak madhi mbele kar bagoromo ma KICC e kaunti ma Nairobi katebwa ma Nairobi kama bende jotend pinje mopogore opogore medo twak ewi wechego minyal tim mar loso chal mar kor lwasi ahinya to pinje mag Afrika.